Hi, this is John Sablan, one half of To Have and To Hold podcast, and Nichole and I are so very blessed that you decided to join us on this journey to improve your marriage, your family life, and your relationships. Now, as a disclaimer, Nichole and I are not perfect. We're not your counselors, and we don't desire to be your spiritual directors. What we do desire, though, is to lend this podcast as an opportunity for us to journey together in holiness and virtue, and to share our experiences of marriage and family life, and what we've learned, what we've encountered, so that it may bless you and your family and your relationships. Now, if you disagree, or if your experience is different, or perhaps if we say something in mistake or in error, you are free to absolutely reject it, my dear brother and sister in Christ. So we just wanted to leave that with you, and we thank you again for your support, and most especially your prayers. So please share, like, subscribe, leave us a comment, and let us know how God is blessing you through this podcast. May God bless you and keep you always.
As our spouses point out our blind spots, and so you have to be
highlight
ready.
them.
You
with
have
a
to
big
be,
highlighter.
Yeah, you have to be ready for that. And again, it's sanctifying, so there's always a greater good that comes out of it.
Notice how she looked at me, sanctifying, the purification process.
Yes, for both of us.
Yes. Welcome back to another episode of To Have and To Hold. We're hoping that you are enjoying all the episodes thus far, and we ask that you continue to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and let us know what you want to hear. And I am always blessed and fortunate to be accompanied by my beautiful, beloved bride. Hey, baby.
Hi.
We are toasting today, grab your drink, to a great feast day, because we're recording this on a feast day that's really near and dear to our heart, because we are celebrating the feast day of Saint Dominic. The founder of the Order of Preachers, of which we are both life-professed Third Order Dominicans. So if you haven't read up on the Dominican Order or about St. Dominic or great saints like St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Catherine of Siena, you're behind the curve. So let us raise our glass and cheers to the Dominican Order and to the Feast of St. Dominic. Okay.
All right.
All righty.
Your time to speak fire?
Time to speak some fire.
All right.
Some truth. Veritas is the motto of all Dominicans. So shout out to all our Dominican brothers and sisters out there who are watching, to all the friars, especially the friars of the Western Province of the Most Holy Name of Jesus, so that we are part of underneath their jurisdiction. So we are grateful for all of our religious friars and sisters that are out there. So shout out to y'all. So yeah, we're going to preach some fire, and we're going to talk about a topic today of really about how do we get on and stay on the same page. A lot of couples that we encounter in all walks of life tend to struggle with this, right? How do we, people get married, they get together, and you get two ambitious people coming together, and then all of a sudden priorities and goals and things start to kind of either converge or conflict with one another. So we want to spend some time talking about how we deal with that. So love, if I was to ask you, how do I get there? What would you say?
Where are we going?
Where are we going? Right? Why would you ask that question, right? Where are we going? So a big part of staying on the same page or getting on the same page is really starting with the end in mind. Speaking of St. Thomas Aquinas, right? The great saint would say, start with the end in mind. That we don't know how to get somewhere if we don't really know what the end destination is. I think about our recent trip in 2018 when we went to 5 different countries. Just planning that logistically was a little stressful, I would be honest, but we had to figure out, well, where are we flying into? Where are we flying out of? Are we going to take the bullet trains up to a place? Or are we going to drive up to a place? Or are we going to actually fly to that place? And so, but we need to know where we're going first. And I think that's important, is we have to start with that end in mind, so that way we're both on the same page. We both understand where we're headed in life, in marriage, and things of that nature. So I think that's, if you were to say, why is it important to even have this discussion? what would you say?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One of them is that, in businesses, they always have a mission. And it helps everyone to feel like they're on the same page.
Yeah.
And so, just like in a married couple, we should have a mission. I think it not only allows us to remain on the same destination, going the same direction, and not drift apart, as you mentioned, other couples sometimes do. But also, it's in terms of romance and keeping romance alive in the marriage, because it's an event in which you're focused on, and it creates some intense feelings. Most of the time, a lot of excitement, because we're trying to get there. So I'd say those are some of the things that come into mind in terms of a marriage, and why setting goals and priorities and communicating those, being real intentional about that, is important.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Lo, because I need to think about it, right? Everybody, when we talk about marriage, again, we recognize that the emotional aspect of love, and we recognize the romance aspect of it. And we would say, that's nice, but it's not the point. But I think part of this of goal setting is the fact that there's a certain adventure, right, that a part to it. And I think we're excited to have this conversation on this episode, because I think that also helps with the romantic piece, right, the romance part of it. And it sure is going back to even the point you made about the business side of it, like the mission, right? What is our mission? And everything we're doing, if we're going to be intentional and deliberate about it, should always align with that mission, should always move that mission forward. So it's kind of like what we were talking about even on the spiritual walk, right? You're either going forward or sliding back. And I think when we're discerning these things and we're talking about goals and priorities, that does this actually forward the mission of what we agreed to, right? Help us achieve that goal. And I think it also helps really unite us on that front, right? So if you think about the romance, going back to that romance piece, it's now we're both working towards a specific adventure, activity, an end goal in mind. And when we goal set together and we stay on the same page, it actually creates like that plan to kind of build upon. And there is I would say there's some assumptions in there that we need to talk through as well. Is like this, there's a certain level of trust. There's got to be safety to be able to kind of go back, right? So we've had real life examples of recent, we were talking about as we were preparing for this. I remember even one where had a really great opportunity, a couple of great opportunities actually, to work for some really great Catholic organizations, really big. It kind of aligned with both my background and what my studies have been, and then just the mission of, I think about two particular instances of these organizations that actually had a profound impact on my life, and therefore our marriage and our family life. And I was, come to you all excited, and I was like, oh, hey, love, I've got these great opportunities. And I remember it was like, you do so well at this, by the way, but with my natural temperament as being a choleric, I'm like fired up about this, like, let's do this. And the question you asked was, okay, love, so where does this fall into our priorities? Where does this align with our goals and our plans? And my response was like, well, honestly, I don't think they do. Right? They actually kind of detour or distract us from what we agreed to. And it was those moments where it's just like, I have to trust in the spousalship and you being my battle partner and us going back to that mission and to that plan that we agreed upon and say, okay, yeah, you're right, it doesn't. So do we need to adapt and adjust that? Or do we just need to say, you know what, that's nice, but it kind of takes away from what we agreed to as a couple.
I like also you talked about the safety piece. So it was a safe environment in which I can ask the question. And if we don't have that trust or that safety, I can see where that could be really contentious, right? So you can say, well, something like, here you seem excited about it, and I'm sharing this excitement with you. It had a strong impact, and it's like, well, you don't want me to be happy, or you always, throw a wrench into my plans, or something like that. So it's important that when you come together as a couple and you create your goals, and we're going to talk about how we do that you do have a sense of trust with one another, safety, should be an opportunity to have some healthy dialogue about your goals and why you desire each and every one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to kind of maybe elaborate even just more if I can add to that is because we're human and we're broken and we're gonna take offense, unfortunately, because we're the most vulnerable with one another. So I think we're always gonna battle with the ebb and flow of just our marriage relationships as well as even with our children. But we could really think that our spouse, if we don't trust, is out to sabotage. Like we only do what you want to do. Or if this was if the shoe was on the other foot, you'd be all about it, right? And then we start to really undermine really the oneness, the unity. And I think, for the couples out there, or those of you maybe discerning marriage and or maybe you're engaged or dating, it's like you have to really think through that, because my intent may have been really good. Like I said, these were, I think, about 2 specific cases, great Catholic organizations, right? I would have been able to, you talk about doing the work that you love, like I would have advanced the mission of the church. They would have been really good opportunities, great. And actually, one of them was really from a place, right, that we like to go and like to visit, especially because it's by the beach. Would have been really nice. But so those things would have everything sounded good. Right. But, and so I would have immediately feel like you're stripping me of that happiness, right? And I think it's a little bit more, it would point out the pride in me, right? That, okay, this is more about you than it is about us. Right. And so I think that point that you bring out is like, we have to be very careful of that. We have to be cognizant of that, because just because it does sound good and ultimately may be good in and of itself, but if it takes away and it disturbs our peace, we've mentioned that before, that's not of God. Right. And so a thing can be good. Discernment truly is only between 2 good things, but it's not necessarily always in God's plan for you to follow that just because you think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I would say that, there are situations where it's clearly the evil one because he's trying to separate. And instead of, like you said, unify, he's trying to divide us. And so he uses those moments in our wounds in order to help us do that, to perhaps change the perception in terms of what I'm saying. So in that case, it could be something like, well, see, you don't will my good anyway, or you're always negative about my, the things I'm trying to pursue.
You're raining on my parade.
Yes, yes, right. Another thing too, I think, as far as when you're talking about those things, again, having those goals in mind and having them written out, that you guys did. I mean, for couples out there, to create those goals together. And one of the things that we do is we try to go on a retreat. Now, we like to do a retreat annually. Given the COVID, it's been a little more challenging in order to do that. However, we still have some time set aside just in terms of talking about our goals and where we are and having that honest conversation. And you have to be in a place where you're both willing to do this, because our spouses point out our blind spots. And so you have to be
highlight them.
You have
with
to
a big
be,
highlighter. Yeah,
you have to be ready for that. And again, it's sanctifying, so there's always a greater good that comes out of it.
Notice how she looked at me, sanctifying, the purification process.
Yes, for both of us.
Yes.
So some of the things we do is looking at goals, like, for instance, spiritual goals. So what we're doing as a couple in terms of prayer life. And it starts off really small. Because John and I have been doing this for some time, obviously, it's a little more perhaps intense. And that's not, I don't think, prudent for anyone to start off that in the same way. Everyone's on their journey. And I would say wherever you are, having a discussion with your spouse and to see what works for you, what's feasible for you. But I would say that at the very least, should be praying together. And more importantly, if you could do the rosary together. If you could do it separately, that's fine, but praying together, I would say, is one of the biggest goals in terms of your marriage and spirituality and whether you're growing. Some other things to consider perhaps would be like reading spiritual books together, obviously going to the sacraments and exercising the sacraments. I mean, one of the basic things, of course, is our Sunday obligation, but if you could do more than that, I would encourage you to do that, but stay close to the sacraments. It's going to give us the nourishment and all that we need, again, to really keep our union together and to flourish and bear fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to kind of add to that, because I think you brought up a good point on knowing where we are, both individually as in a couple. And so just to speak to that for a second, meaning, if you caught the fire and you're like a new convert to the faith, and or you're a revert and you're like, boom, I'm ready to do this, but you've never prayed before in your life, right? Like you're like, man, just getting back to Sunday Mass is a challenge, right? Okay, that's cool. That's a starting point. So what Nichole is sharing is like, well, now you're not all of a gonna sit and say, well, I'm gonna fast, 3 times a week, and I'm gonna pray 15 million rosaries during the week and spend 4 hours in silence every day. And those are unrealistic. And quite honestly, your soul, your mind has to be disposed to be able to even take that on, right? So you have to grow in the faith naturally. It's, it's like you want to sign up to run a marathon, right? You're not going to go and you've never ran in your entire life. You couldn't even walk a mile right now, but you're going to go and sign up for it. And in 2 weeks, you're just going to go after it. No, you have to prepare. You have to train. You have to change the whole regimen. You have to discipline yourself in order to be able to do that. So I think now it doesn't excuse us. And I think I just want to point that out for those of you who may see it as a, get out of jail free pass, where it doesn't excuse us to say, well, I'm not there yet, so therefore I won't. I'll just kind of about it, right? I think that's the point why we would want to do a retreat and want to set these goals to say, okay, where are we today and where do we want to be? So in that, there's individual prayer. What do I need to grow in my own spirituality? Because I think we can't give what we don't have. So as individuals, we need to be able to do that. Where do we want to grow as a couple? We're fortunate that we're both third order Dominicans, but imagine if we weren't, right? If one of us wasn't, so there's a specific rule that we live, and that implies that we're doing the liturgy of the hours at a certain point in time. We have a daily devotion to the rosary. We have certain days that we fast on, we're fasting every Friday and abstaining on Fridays. We have a daily devotion to our, the Divine Mercy Chaplet. There's these different things that we live. Now, so if we weren't both third order Dominicans, we'd have to talk through that. Now, that being said, now we have to add on or figure out, okay, well, is that enough? What spiritual reading are we doing? We've recently taken on more of Scripture, right? So even though we read daily Scripture because we go through daily Mass, we read the Liturgy of the Hours or daily Scripture, then we meant cracking open the Bible and actually going through commentary and learning more about the Word so that we can be edified in that way in our faith. So that would be an example there. And I would say, also adding on like the rosary, like praying the rosary together. And then for those of us who have families, praying the rosary with your family. Right? I think for those of you who watch the other podcasts, like A Priest, Prophet, King with our two sons, we've spoken about that, right? Like they would say, like, yeah, Dad, when you asked us to do it, it was a little bit rough, but I'm glad you asked us to do it. So don't feel like just because it's a goal and people are fighting against that goal, that all of a sudden it excuses you because you don't want to have that contention or heartache in your home.
Yeah, and it's very important, I think, as a male, as the husband and father, to lead in prayer.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and we have to do something on a separate. But for us as men, we are the spiritual heads of the home. We have a specific authority given to us by God, and we think about the fourth commandment of the authority both as parents, but specifically as head of the home. Go to Ephesians 5, and you'll know about that. We have an obligation, a responsibility, and therefore effect and influence on our home and the divine protection of our wife and our children. So this is a key part. It's why we started off with spirituality first. That should be your first conversation when we talk about the retreat. Okay, when we talk about goal setting, what does it matter about finances or any other professional goals if you're not rooted in Christ? We talked about this being a sacrament, and therefore we have to find ourselves in lock and step with Holy Mother Church and with what God has in store for us and planned for us in both our roles as husband and wives, fathers and mothers.
And the other one would be, personal, professional goals that we've had. So we talk about those and make sure that they're aligned with, again, our spirituality doesn't detour from that. So we have conversations about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, we just had a recent conversation where, we've had some discussions we talked about Nicole passing her licensure and all of that. And, as we try to discern, okay, what does that really mean in our lives? We have the World Ablaze apostolate, we have our own day jobs, things of that nature. And so I had just a career discussion with Nicole about saying, well, hey, this kind of popped into my head in a discussion as it relates to my day job, my work. And we just kind of worked it out. It was like I was thinking about this. I had her in mind with that and our family life. And we just kind of said, nah, really, this is kind of where we are. And not sure if that's really the plan. We'll keep it in prayer. Right? And I think that was really good to be able to kind of have that discussion and dialogue and kind of work through that.
Yeah, with this particular situation, had I gone along with it, even though it would be incongruent with what our goals that we had set, and these are things that are modified every year. So in terms of growth, it's sort of, we ask the question, where do I see myself in a year with regard to these particular areas?
That's right.
So in this case, this would have deviated from our original goal, but it would have benefited me greatly.
True. That's very true. Yeah. So to put that into context, right, it would have just benefited Nicole more than it would have benefited me. It would have put probably a little bit of a stress on me, I would say, just from the overall entirely what I would have taken on. But so my focus was on saying, well, hey, baby, I'm thinking about this really to kind of take care of something for you. And she's like, wow, that would be nice, but the juice isn't worth the squeeze. In that sense, right?
Well, the other thing is that I recognize that although it would have benefited me greatly, it's actually incongruent with our spiritual goals, and we can't do that. So I knew that obviously it was a bad choice, and so anyway, you see the importance of creating these goals.
Well, and how easy it is to, if we're not having this discussion and we're not constantly pointing each other back, how easy you can just fall into the whole pleasure principle, right? About, oh, wow, this is really benefit me. Cool. And my husband's all about it, so let's do it. That's not really the way where we should approach it. That's why we have to have these discussions. So I think checking in there, and personally and professionally. So if one of you, all of a sudden wants to start a business or something, or and all of a sudden go, wait a minute, we never talked about that. Well, I think I saw a couple posts. These people are making a lot of money. Trust me, we've all been there, right? Like, I saw this ad come across, and while I was scrolling, and we can make millions and we don't have to do anything. And I just gotta, take a second against our mortgage, or draw from my 401k. You're probably gonna have to have that conversation, but those are why we have the goal setting piece. One of the things I would say to add to what we also. So again, let me start back up a little bit. You talked about this being kind of a year to year, right? So we're always looking back to see, we assess and evaluate. Well, did we meet our goals?
Right.
And then and if we didn't, why not? And then how do we adjust and adapt there? But one of the things I think is important as part of this planning is also our marriage. It's a goal for our marriage. We've been married 25 years, so we just kind of sitting pretty. No, good marriages continuously work and take an honest look and say, well, did we do the dates that we said we were going to do? Did we go on our dates? And if that answer is like, no, we didn't, well, why not? What got in the way of that? Where do we see ourselves going as a couple? And it's dreaming. We talked about dreaming in previous episodes, and that's something that we both love doing. But it's having that discussion about our marriage, not just the material side of that, but like the spiritual side of it, the emotional side, the mental side. How do we spend more time together? How do we go on more dates together? How do we, maybe we need to rid our life of something that is preventing us from spending the time that we desire to spend with one another. Now, that also means that, you're not just inserting things in there to not spend time with each other, right? Like, so sometimes people tend to say, oh, well, yeah, you go off and do your little hobby thing, and, you didn't have enough hobbies this year because I saw you a lot. That's not the kind of goal you would want. I mean, maybe you have it, but, you need to get more hobbies. You're in the house a lot. I don't want to see your face that much. That's not a real goal, guys. Just saying. Just saying.
That's true.
Yeah. I think another goal, I don't know if you had anything to add on that level.
Well, it's just that Yes, those are goals, but the nice thing about our nightly examine that we've talked about in a previous episode is really a way to gauge how we're doing. So that's almost a daily progress check, right? So how are we doing with that? If we did set a goal in terms of, like you said, dates.
Yeah.
I think about love language because for me, it's about quality time. So do we spend quality time? So every evening when you ask the question, what can I do better for you? It's really an invitation to say, well, I like to spend some more quality time with one another. So it's nice to do the examine with you so we can kind of, in terms of our marriage goals, we can kind of check progress every day.
Well, one of the things that just popped in my head too is I think our, it's a little bit different now with the whole Rona thing going on right now. But when it take us outside of this COVID situation, but we're daily mass goers. And so we had to start really saying, well, no, if we're going to make a day, this is something we need. We need the spiritual nourishment as individuals, but definitely as a couple, in order to be sustained to do all the things that we're doing. So we had to start to really safeguard and protect that and say, well, we're actually not going to, unless there's obviously, there'll be exceptions, but the exception shouldn't be the rule. We need to not schedule things and not plan for things that would take away from our ability to go to daily mass, for instance, right? And I think that's a part of this goal setting, is saying, well, no, spiritually and for our marriage, we're making a commitment. Now, we're at a different season than some people, right? So, but that's a discussion we've had. No, we need to say, and I need you to protect me from that, because there's going to be times that, again, assuming that it's not avoidable, because some things you can't necessarily. But I think we also put that as part of our goal planning, right? Is to be able to safeguard that time or safeguard that goal, because other things will happen. We're not going to say life doesn't happen. Life happens. But we always kind of have to go back to that goal. Well, this affects it. Is that just a one-time deal? Or is that do we have to readdress the plan because now this is all of a sudden introduced into our life and we have to kind of adapt.
Yeah, so, you get some really good opportunities, but they come in and they interfere with perhaps a spiritual goal. So like you said, and that actually did occur, where there was an opportunity, but if I took that opportunity, then I would miss daily mass, not just one time, but every Thursday.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was very clear to me that wasn't something that I could participate in. So it's those types of things, and that's why I think goal setting and communicating with your spouse about that is so important, because when you get those good opportunities and you're flooded with some strong positive emotions, perhaps you're not thinking clearly, and so it takes your spouse to kind of
point them out, right? Point them out and to just remind us of those. One of the things I would say also with goal setting that I think is key is finances. Right? Because we know in marriages, you hear like some of the top reasons why people end up getting divorced, right, or separated, whatever, is because of their financial situation. And I think and it can be a pretty intense, stressful, contentious topic, and that should be part of that planning, right? So as you can see, as we start to talk about how we live marriage, right, that we don't just avoid all the, just pray together a lot, right? I mean, we realize that you have to talk about finances. Where does this align with our financial goals? What are our goals? Do we want to get a home, right? Or do we need to pay off debt? And those types of things where we don't, maybe one of us spends more than the other, right? We have that healthy dialogue in ours. Like I have a tendency to want to just give my wife and my kids everything. That's a natural tendency for me. I don't want them, we both come from nothing. And so it's just like, that's my natural temptation, is to say, if you want it, we'll get it.
Also, in terms of temperament, I think that for choleric/sanguine, it's about good feelings. And so it's hard to say no, because and then obviously, automatically, we stir some negative feelings. And so knowing that the different temperaments, I had to actually share with John, it's okay to say no.
Yeah, which was super empowering. Right, because you don't realize, as you just pointed out, right? It's certain things feel good, and your spouse will highlight it, but her empowering and enabling me to be able to do that, because I didn't, I'm not, consciously thinking that this is my temperament at work. I in retrospect, I can see it, right, and I reflect on it, but it's just like, oh, now I can be able to say no, and she's allowed me to be able to say, yeah, no, we can't do that, right? We have these goals, and I'm trying to save for this, or or whoever is responsible for that in the relationship or the marriage. But that's the part of why this dialogue and this goal planning and setting and checking in is so key, and be able to even work through some of those things. But finances are important, so you need to make that as a part of your annual retreat or quarterly retreat, whatever you want to do. Is to be able to talk through that. Where do we want to be? Do we want to pay this house off? Do we want to pay our debt off? Hey, we want to minimize, we've accumulated some credit card debt. That's just not good. Those of you out there probably familiar with Dave Ramsey and the different ways, are we living our life? Are we stewarding our gifts according to the biblical understanding of that? Right? And that's going to take a lot of dialogue, maybe some classes, maybe some formation, but a lot of discussion and agreement upon one another so that we can always point back and say, hey, that takes us away from this goal. So now we said we were going to buy a home in 5 years. If you want to go do this boat thing, dude, right, go ahead and make that 10 years now, right? And you just need to be able to kind of talk through that as part of the planning. The other thing I wanted to talk about, or one of the things we do talk about, I think people should consider adding this, would be just relationships in general. Familiar relationships, friends, that means current ones that you have, maybe ones you want to seek out. As you grow in your spiritual life, you highlights pretty much where you are with people, right? All of a sudden people stop calling you because they know you're about Jesus, right? I mean, I've had that plenty of times, like, why are we not getting invited to those parties anymore? Because you're about Jesus, and you convict them of the life that they live or don't live. So that being said, it's like kind of taking a look at what are the healthy relationships in your life, what are the things that are life-giving, and what are the things that are detrimental to potentially your marriage and your children. So you need to take a look at those relationships. Are you spending a lot of time with the boys, with the gals? And this is, again, has to be a healthy place, because that's never good when you're spending most of your time outside of the marriage and family. But I think it's a good thing to goal plan. What are our relationships look like outside of this relationship, and or do we need to seek certain mentors? One of the things that's, as you grow in life too, right? Are there people that you can't always just be pulling people along? You yourself need to be spiritually fed and spiritually led. So finding somebody who may be ahead in life, in their season, in their faith, in their marriage, whatever it may be, is critical to you growing as well. Anything to add on that one?
I think that was great.
Okay. So what else? I think we went through personal, there's professional, there's relationships. I guess children, right? I mean, if God blesses you with children, are you goal setting with your children? How are your relationships with each one of your children? Both as mother and as father. And we're assessing and evaluating. Maybe you didn't spend enough time with one or the other, or maybe you didn't spend time with any of them, or maybe you didn't have, father-daughter dates or father-son dates or vice versa. What are the goals? Especially as they start to, you only have them for so long. I mean, they're always your kids, but still they're going to move on in life. So are you goal setting around your children?
Just, I guess, being intentional about creating some time for them, right? To have quality time.
Or leading them in life, right? I mean, you start to get in these seasons where you talk about schooling, or, homeschool versus not homeschool. And, when are you going to give them a device, right? Which you need to really consider that, delaying that, or, involved with their friends and involved in sports and things of that nature. How much extracurricular is too extra?
Right. And no matter what your season is, I mean, it's even if the kids are at the home, you should allocate time to guide them, because they always need that. That's
great. Yeah, great point. Because ours, I mean, all our children are adults, doesn't mean we just stop playing. We're not paying for them more anymore. No more goal setting for you. Sorry, Bria. Just kidding. No, you have to still talk about that. What's a relationship like? Again, assess, evaluate, adapt, adjust. Now that they're a different season, that means that there's different needs and different expectations and different things that will be applicable now that weren't there before. So I think you need to include that in your planning. Don't just think of it as goals, material, financial. There's so much more to it when we think about marriage and family life that are critical to this discussion.
Yeah, and so for families that are in, maybe have some new transitions going on in their life, I remember for me, my youngest going into kindergarten. That was a big transition for me. It was an emotional one. And then, of course, when my first child went on to college, that was hard. And then also when she got married. And so, they just rest assured that they're going to need you, that you're going to continue to guide, but your relationship will look different. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of just ensuring that you continue to remain, that closeness, safeguard that closeness in your relationship, is having conversations with them in terms of how does this look. We don't want to be overbearing and by any means, but we want to encourage them and help them to flourish and be the, who God designed them to be.
Yeah, and I think one of those things I just think about, as you referred to like Bria leaving to college, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't realize as a father, because for fathers and mothers it's different, the effect and the impact that it had on you, mm-hmm. right? So part of this discussion and planning would be like, all right, we're approaching that first. We know some friends that are going through this now, where this is your first kid going off to college, just like your last kid going out and leaving the house. Well, what is it that we're going to need? How do we adjust, mm-hmm. right? What are our goals around that? Well, how are we going to kind of deal with the mourning and the grieving of that loss, really, in your home or in your heart? And so that looks different for you both, but it's being able to have this place to be able to discuss that mm-hmm. and put a plan in place to be able to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, and just allowing the woman to communicate in terms of what she needs. And I'd say that if your wife has difficulty expressing what she needs, I'd say just listen. I mean, really, that's what helped me, is just listen as I'm processing my feelings. And it was new, and sometimes I didn't have the words to really name what was going on. But as I was trying to figure it out, I just needed somebody just to kind of listen and support in terms of just perhaps giving me a hug or give the tissue or whatever it is, mm-hmm. But not trying to fix it.
Yeah, which I had a problem with for a little bit. But moving on, that's a different episode.
Yes.
So again, hopefully those are some tips that would work for you. Don't get caught up so much. We tend to be by the beach. So if we can take a weekend trip and more than just once a year, that's awesome. But don't let that part of it or the financial part of it, maybe you just talk to your in-laws and say, hey, can you watch the kids for this weekend? We're just going to do a staycation at home, but we're going to go through this exercise. We're going to get out a whiteboard. We're going to get out a notepad. We're going to bring prayer into that moment. I think that's the other part too, is bringing prayer into that retreat and that reflection of really asking God to guide you. Don't just make it on your own accord. Right. But asking God, Lord, what do you want for us during this time, during this upcoming year, with our finances, with our spirituality, with our marriage, with our relationships, with our children, with all the many blessings that you've given us? What do you want to do with this? So that way you're disposed and docile and able to hear what God wants you to do in those moments for that upcoming year.
Right. And after all, He's going to bring your marriage and your family life to great fulfillment. He knows what's best, better than we do, for our lives. So, listening to Him. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. So,
absolutely.
Hopefully this was helpful to y'all, and it's something that you can really take and put into practice. That way you can get on the same page and to stay on the same page. And so we are grateful for you joining us again on another episode. We ask that you continue to like, comment, subscribe, share with all those that you think may benefit from this, as Nichole and I try to offer up some wisdom in our short but lived life in marriage, relationships, and faith, and everything in between. So we just want to again wish all of our fellow Dominicans out there, any of those that are Thomists, that are of the Aquinas mindset, a very happy feast day of St. Dominic. We hope that you are all staying healthy and safe out there during this crazy time, and continue to hold us up in prayer, and we'll do the same for you. So God bless you and keep you always.